Welcome to another episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, the podcast where we take a deep dive into the mystery of Scooby-Doo media, getting clues through interviews with people who helped bring our favorite mystery-solving dog to life, and maybe eating some Scooby snacks along the way. I'm your host, Alexa Lawler.
Sandwich, big sandwich.
Build that sandwich high.
You're right. Politics have no place in balloon animalry.
Used to say, whoa, nobody move. My tuna fish sandwich is missing.
Well, that's a weird thing to say.
And you just clap your hands and kind of roar in a confused way. Perfect.
It is October 2025, which really means only one thing to me. And if you guessed the 10-year anniversary of Be Cool Scooby-Doo, you're right. The pilot episode of Be Cool, Mystery 101, premiered on October 5th, 2015 in the US, and here in Canada, it premiered on October 8th, 2015 on Teletoon. So, really, this episode's release is only one day off the anniversary. Anyways, I digress. To celebrate, my interviews this month will be Cool Scooby-Doo themed, and to narrow that down even further, it just so happens that both of the interviews this month will be about the music of Be Cool Scooby-Doo specifically. We're starting, of course, with Jake Monaco, composer for Be Cool and Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost. Without further ado, let's get right to the interview. Let's start off with 3 Scooby-Doo trivia questions if you're ready for it.
Perfect. Let's bring them on.
Fantastic. Okay, so for the first question, true or false, Be Cool Scooby-Doo had 2 seasons?
That is true.
You're correct, yeah.
Yes.
Start off easy. I'm like, you should know this. You worked on it.
Funnily enough, the second season did not get totally greenlit until much later into season 1. Typically, they might greenlight 2 seasons together since they're starting something new, and they want to, commit to the full 52 episode order. But this one had a slight delay until they approved a season 2.
Interesting. Always interesting. So question 2 of the trivia, which of the following is not a Be Cool Scooby-Doo episode title? So A, Be Cold Scooby-Doo, B, Party Like It's 1899, and C, Big Scare and the Big Easy.
I think it's the first one because it's supposed to be something else. What did you say? It was Be Cold?
Yeah.
Well, I know Party in 1899 is definitely one. And then the other, the Big Easy. Maybe it's the Big Easy one. We had something in New Orleans, I feel, but maybe the title is just different. All right. I'm gonna go Big Easy. That's final answer.
You're right. I stole that one from What's New Scooby-Doo.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
So all real episode titles, but yeah, that last one is What's New Scooby-Doo.
You're sneaky. We got you though.
Yeah. So last question for the trivia. Which member of the gang is related to Bobby Flay in Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost?
Oh, let's see. Is Fred?
You're right. Yeah, it is.
Yes,
Fred.
okay. It's been 8 years or so probably since I remember working on that.
Yeah, no, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Okay, perfect. 3 for 3 on the trivia. Awesome.
All right, perfect. Yes.
So starting off on the general questions, what is your relationship to Scooby-Doo? Did you grow up watching the show at all?
Yes. I remember in middle school when I would come home and one of the after school shows that I would watch would be, I think it was Scooby and Scrappy at that point. But that was just the introduction. And then from there, got to see some of the original versions, specifically, oh my gosh, the first iteration, he's from the late 70s. Where are you? Oh my God. Yeah. Sorry. All this has been a minute.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I fell in love with the entire concept of it, and I love the mystery side of it and the music that accompanied it. was able to kind of embrace some of that for the Be Cool iteration of the show.
Totally. Yeah, I want to dive into that a little bit more later for sure. Do you have a favorite personal memory related to Scooby-Doo? Is it childhood? Is it working on it?
So I think my son was, I think it was either he was 1 or 2 when we decided to all dress up in the Scooby-Doo theme for Halloween one year. So he was clearly Scooby. And then my husband and I, he was Shaggy, and I think I was Fred, or no, I was Big Scooby, and I think he was Scrappy. Uh,
Oh,
and then we had like my sister come in, and she filled the Velma or Daphne role, I think. And then we had a couple other people that joined us, and that was a lot of fun. So that will always stick with me. And then as my son got older, he started really getting into Scooby probably when he was 5 or 6. And he's 11 now, and I still walk in. Sometimes I'll catch him watching one. So it's a fun little flashback for me.
oh, I love that. Does he watch Be Cool at all?
Honestly, that is probably his least favorite iteration. He will always gravitate towards the either, where are you, or whatever the iteration was that came right after that, that was still kind of, more in that animated style of the original.
A purist.
Yes, exactly.
My nephew is too. I keep trying to show him Be Cool, and he's like, that's not Scooby.
It's so funny. I feel like it's either like a love-hate thing, all over the internet. When it first came out, it was like, oh, this is great, finding the really, the fun positives of the series. Or it's people just like, what did you do to this beloved franchise and the way that they look? And, so passionate about it either way.
100%. Yeah. So moving back a little bit, I want to talk about your career. Did you always want to have a career in music, or did you just kind of fall into it?
I played guitar from a young age, and it wasn't until high school that I like started getting a little more serious about it. Played in a band my senior year of high school, just to, that was the first band for a lot of us, and got to enjoy that. And then through college, I originally did not go to college to study music. It was more of like, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to study this, but really I want to play in a band, and I want to like, socialize and, be able to grow in that direction. So I did the whole band thing. And then after getting a D in physics my first semester, I decided I would switch away from any sort of math and science focus and maybe start to look at the music side of things. I figured that would be good anyway. So went through my undergrad, focused on music and arts technology, which gave me a good foundation for like the computer side of music, as well as the actual, pen to paper and understanding the theory behind it. And then a couple years after graduation, I applied to a program at USC here in Los Angeles called the Scoring for Motion Pictures and Television program. And it's just a 1-year intensive kind of graduate certificate. They take all your experience that you've had in undergrad, they show you how to apply it to film scoring. And then kind of gives you a really good jumping off point. And that led me to an assistantship with another composer where, really more of a mentorship, and got to learn a lot more over the course of the next, 7, 8 years.
Awesome. And was that under like working for a specific film or anything, or was that
When I started working for the other composer, his name was Christoph Beck, and I was there. I think we did almost 40 or 50 projects over the course of the time that I was there. So it was a lot of feature films. We didn't really do too much in TV. So when I kind of broke out on my own and started to score Be Cool in it's either late 2014 or it was early 2015. Definitely a bit of a shell shock when it came to, okay, you got 2 weeks to do an episode, but every week we're going to start working on a new one. And so, you're talking about one, you're writing another, you're revising another, and you're delivering another. So at any point there's, 4 episodes going on all at the same time. And it's it's tough administratively in that situation as well.
Oh man, of course. And you mentioned guitar. Do you play any other instruments, and what do you gravitate towards when you're composing?
Well, anything you bang on is an instrument, right? Okay. So I play the table and the chair and the pencils.
Perfect.
I can get around on the keyboard. It's definitely not my primary instrument, but can do enough to get the notes into the computer and then make them sound good. Um, Otherwise, guitar and anything that kind of looks like a guitar. So kind of venture into ukulele, mandolin, have some weird stringy instruments from places in Greece that I got, and Italy, and so just all sorts of fun tones like that. Um, I love to create my own, whether it's instruments or sounds or something like that. So I've commissioned some hubcap banjos and things that were actually made out of whether it's scarbox, copper pots that gives a little bit more of a weird resonance to it. So it sounds unique.
That's awesome. I love that. Would you say that you have a certain musical style, and what are your main influences or inspirations?
Let's see. I remember when I first came out here and started going to USC and kind of diving a little bit more into film music. Um, I loved listening to Thomas Newman and his scores to like Finding Nemo. His score for Lemony Snicket's Series of Unfortunate Events, I think, was one of my favorites when I first started getting into a lot of this. And just like unique sounds, they're organic in nature, but they've been manipulated in some way, shape, or form to make them sound, as though they are not completely organic. And so I thought that combination was something that got me very excited. So I kind of embrace that with a lot of what I do, where I'll record stuff physically, or I will work with other musicians to get a lot of source material. But then I'll start to play with it. I might stretch it far beyond where it should ever be stretched, or pitching it way up or pitching it way down, and finding these very interesting sonic textures that make a piece a little bit more different than a regular orchestra. So that's kind of where I gravitate towards.
And so when it comes to composing for animation, are you composing to an image like a storyboard or looking at an animatic or something, or are you just given a general vibe of what the scene would require?
Um, all of the above. There have been some times where, especially if I'm brought in early, where I will get storyboards and it's a very rough timing. So, which is much harder to deal with in animation, as you're trying to hit or comment on a lot of things that are happening visually, especially when it comes to Scooby-Doo, where you get this kind of very old-timey Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera kind of feel, or what we call it is if you're Mickey Mousing what's happening, to get more specific. So something happens, you want to make sure you can punctuate that with music. But when you're working with animatics and you just get these little storyboards or something, you don't know the exact timing yet, and they're going to be adjusting that all the way up until their final passes of animation, which only happen 2 weeks before they're doing their final mix of everything. So even when we would start, and we start the process by doing what's called spotting, where we sit there, we watch the entire episode, whether it's in animatic form, whether it's half complete, whether it's these beginning renders, sometimes if they're doing it in with a CGI versus pen and pencil, or the equivalent of pen and pencil on computers now. So it really varies, but not until that final cut can I really make those final adjustments to be able to hit things. So I'll try to get like a basic idea down, so at least I know what I'm doing, and I know that they're on board with the tone and the direction of the music, and then the final sculpting can come towards the end.
And does that process differ at all when you're working on a TV series versus like an animated film?
Not really. I think what's nice about working on an animated feature is just the fact that you have more time, and hopefully, at least, where you've been brought in and you are getting to see some of the animatics, and you're developing the score and the sound along with the animation as that's getting done. And certain things can be more inspiring to um figure out what we want to do sonically for a certain character, and seeing some of those images can give us a really good kickstart.
Are you given like complete freedom, or are they like, does a director have like a specific vision and give you any kind of parameters?
Very different on every project again, but typically there'll be some sort of what we call temp music, where they'll take music from, other series or films or whatnot, and they'll put it in just to see, okay, this is the kind of tone that I want. Okay, I want it to sound totally orchestral. I want it to sound like a jazz band. I want it to be completely electronic. So at least they have a start to where they want to go. And that way, the composer gets a pretty good kickoff in the direction that we need to kind of proceed in. Um, Sometimes it's just a conversation from the beginning. For instance, with Be Cool, um, I was asked to send in a short sample of some of the stuff that I've done. And then I was chosen out of three people to then kind of demo for it. I was sent a couple of different scenes, at which point I scored those and sent them in. And then you get called in for a meeting after that. So it's kind of like this three-step process of even before we can get onto it. But I think because of the choices that I was given, or the choices I made during that spec demo to get there, that's what kind of stuck with where we wanted to go. It was, wanted to draw from that original kind of jazzy sound from the 70s and early 80s, and see what I could do with that to maybe contemporize it a little bit, but I wanted to stick with the main tone of that. And be able to see what we could do for fun to accent certain things. And I think there's a little bit more orchestra that's built into the score for Be Cool versus what it originally was. But yeah, we kind of have to tailor that as we go.
Totally. And to just elaborate on that a little bit, how did you get into that initial spec demo process?
So yeah, it was getting the call to submit a reel for it. I knew a couple people that had been involved in certain shows uh, over at Warner Brothers. So once I got the opportunity to just submit some music, and they'd be like, "Oh, we should see what he can do." Okay, we like this guy's stuff. So then we get sent these couple of scenes that have zero music, and we get a brief along with it, and the brief kind of describes a little bit of what they're after, but there's not usually like a specific example. Um, so really from there, it's just kind of taking a swing and seeing if it lands.
Awesome. And can you speak to the different types of music that are in a Scooby-Doo episode? Like, are there specific like names or anything for each little section?
Yeah, so I think I that's what we call them, or score cues. It's like, okay, at this point we're gonna cue the music to come in. Um, in terms of like this kind of sonic palette that's used over the course of that series, where the basis is what we just talked about with the orchestral and jazz kind of combination. But then you get to certain episodes like the Grand Slam episode, where it's based in a baseball stadium, and we incorporated some of the baseball, what the organ might be typically doing, and we kind of get this almost like a swing band in there for the romp scene. And then there's other ones that you have this futuristic Me, Myself, and AI, I think was the name of the episode, and that's got all sorts of synth stuff in it. When it's talking about what's specific to that episode. But then when we go back with our gang, we kind of fall back into what the overarching sound of the entire series is. And then in each episode, there's a bit of a combination of the two as, they get deeper into the situation, or the bad guy of the episode is attacking them, and you kind of get to bridge that.
And was it your idea to have outros to each episode that matched the theme?
Yes, it was. But I mean, it's not something that has, I mean, it's something that has been done before. And I always find it very exciting to just have something a little different than just throwing in the main title, maybe without lyrics, or, again, in this situation, I don't think there were lyrics in it, but, just that's what might typically happen. But, we see shows like Family Guy, and, a couple, I'm sure there's many, many others. The Simpsons did it a lot, I think, where you get something that's unique for that episode, and it's only 30 seconds long, shouldn't take that long, and it's just that special little Easter egg, for people that'll actually stick around during that 30 seconds of credits.
Totally.
And I had heard something that there was an alternate theme to Be Cool. Is that true? Can you talk about that at all?
So what's in there currently is the edits from a track from a library that Warner Brothers worked with. I think I probably did like 8 or 9 different versions, all of which we liked and we were getting there. But I think that some of the higher ups involved in this show, when they saw this original track that was cut in, they just got attached to it. And I don't think it really mattered what I had done. They were stuck with that. To the point where like I think there's a little janky edit in there too, and they liked how it kind of felt like it skipped a beat, and some things where I'm just like, oh, I need to fix it, but we ended up with it as it is, and I've grown very used to it, and I love it for what it does.
So once you have songs composed, where do they go from there? What's that kind of approval process like?
So when we were first starting the series, I kind of bake in another review or two for those first 6 episodes, because we're just getting into the flow. We're kind of learning how they're learning how I work. I'm learning how production works. Working with the showrunner, a producer, and an executive producer. There's all different kinds of people that would kind of pop in and out. But I would get an episode, and then I might score either the first 10 minutes, or I might pick the 3 key scenes in the episode and score those first, and then take those back for review, just so we can kind of develop them before I'm going much further with it. And after the first 6 or so, we kind of got into a good groove of they would just send it to me. I would do the entire episode in the within 2 weeks, and then sending it back to them. They take a few days for review, and then we have a meeting. I get all the notes. I got to go back and revise, and so we just kind of keep that process moving along. But I want to say we spent no more than a month on each episode, so it's a quick turnaround. And like I said, you've got the episodes stacked on top of each other as well. So going back and forth, and typically we'd get like 2 rounds of reviews, and then any last minute notes I would just address, and then those would all go to the final dub, when they're gonna combine the music, the sound effects, the dialogue, and they mix all that stuff together.
And like what kind of notes would you typically get? Is it like the music is too loud here, or like how does like what would you be getting back?
um Sometimes it wouldn't necessarily be too loud or too soft, because they have control over the volume at the dub, and they kind of decide that. But where it can come to intensity or busyness, maybe there's too much going on under a certain scene, or we need a little bit more. I need more energy here. Okay, let's pick up the tempo. Let's make it a little bit snappier. I want to make this a little more fun. This needs to be more dark. So it really depends on the tone of the show also. But then it can get into more specific notes. There were several episodes where I wanted to hit things so specifically to the frame, and we're talking about 24 frames in a second. So if you're off by a frame or two, the untrained eye, or someone other than the director or showrunner, who is meticulously looking at every single frame and how each line moves and the character and everything about it, no one's going to notice it. But when we get into that, and we're getting into like the minutia, it's almost like counterproductive in a way. But a lot of the time the notes are really good, and they always improved the music, and I'm always right there on board, to get across the finish line.
What would you say is your personal composing process? Is there any particular places where you get inspiration, or is there anything that you absolutely need beside you when you're working?
My coffee, and or tea. Let's see. Otherwise, once I kind of get the idea of what we're all after and the tone of it, I will step away from any sort of picture and just write what I think some of the main themes are going to be. So in this case, there's a very specific theme for like our mystery, where they get onto the onto the clues, and they start to unravel things. The wrap up that's at the end of every episode has a very specific theme that recurs in every episode. But again, like the end titles, a little bit of whatever the sonic, motif of that episode is kind of baked into it. So I'd write the wrap up theme, I've got a mystery theme, and I've got, whatever other theme might be in there. So now I've got these, I'm putting them into the first episode, getting the feedback. And once we get those kind of settled, now other things can just kind of expand and grow from there. And, little bits of inspiration are taken from these really, the tent pole cues, and then can be implemented. So in, me, myself, and AI, for instance, working on what the robots theme is and what the intensity is going to be, that might be a scene where I want them to see it first, just one scene, because if they like it, then I can take those elements, because there was like electronics and distortion and, something that was very, very specific. And if they didn't like it, I don't want to do, the 7 scenes that involve that theme before I get the approval for the first one. So, work smarter, not harder kind of thing.
And were you also involved in like the chase scene sequences?
About maybe, well, we were involved in all of them in terms of at least editing what the song was that they chose from a music library. I would say there's probably 10 or 12 of those romps, where I did write an original song or collaborated with one of the showrunners on that. Or actually the showrunner and one of the producer, the story guys on it. And the three of us, I want to say it was for the first few episodes, they actually had some original song concepts together, and they were coming over to the studio, and we were spending a night and, like producing the track out and everything. That became less and less feasible as we kind of got into the series. Number one, production didn't have the money in order to take care of this, like the amount of production that needs to go into a song like that. So once we got past it, then it turned more into either I was filling a gap for a very specific kind of romp theme that they wanted, or they were pulling one from a music library that they had to deal with, and then they'd send me that track or the stems, and then I would cut it in and edit it to the scene.
So when you're going back to the musical cues here, when are you wanting it to blend like as seamlessly as possible?
Yes. If music is doing its job properly, you're not really going to notice it, unless it is a scene montage, like a romp song, where it is like very much geared towards that. I mean, it's essentially like a, anywhere from a 30-second to minute and a half music video, in a way, where the music is driving what's happening. You're only hearing a little bit of sound effects, maybe a little bit of dialogue here and there, but it's mostly music. Otherwise, it's how do you get in subtly? How do you, maybe accent something just to bring some attention to it, but you're not so focused on the ding as you are on the movement itself, just to highlight, oh, that was important. I guess we should, make sure that we remember that Daphne has her hand puppets in this situation, or, whatever whatever the is.
Were you inspired at all by any of the older series? Like, was there anything that you like elements that you specifically wanted to pull in?
Yeah, I think the whole jazz, and small orchestra feel from the original, all that stuff was recorded live, and it's so nice to be able to hear those ensembles, as they were written and brought to life. And now with a lot of these, where the composers are meant to program everything, and it's all, what we call in the box, where, all of them are samples, and we have to make sure that those samples sound really good. But going back and listening to how some of the scenes were played, and how the jazz feel kind of got woven into it a little bit, and then taking inspiration from those and trying to do a little bit of a throwback. And I think that that's important for the people that are the diehard fans and have seen every iteration of the show and whatnot.
And how did you come to work on the Gourmet Ghost? How did you get the call for that one?
I want to say it was the same one of the same people on production from Be Cool went over and was working on Gourmet Ghost. And it's kind of the same deal where they asked for a reel. But because I had the experience on Be Cool and some of the people knew my work from there, I didn't necessarily have to spec for it, but I did go in for a meeting, and we all got along, and so that was good. And then we kind of discussed the direction, and the fact that this did have a bit of a Revolutionary War kind of feel to the ghost and everything. So taking the inspiration again from that and the time period, and how can we draw elements from that sonically and then kind of weave it into a very similar jazz and orchestral palette that I had used in Be Cool.
And just broadly between Be Cool and Gourmet Ghost, did everything that you composed make the final cut besides those alternate themes?
So, I mean, aside from, I think in the series, maybe there were a couple of romp songs that we gave a shot, but again, producer was wanting something very specific. But for Gourmet Ghost, I mean, that was it. Kind of plowed all the way through, and they liked the main theme, they liked the wrap up theme, and again, kind of did those tentpole cues in there, and made sure that everybody was on board before spreading them throughout the whole episode or the feature film.
And for Gourmet Ghost, I believe you were working with someone else and you were co-composing on that one. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Matthew Jansen, I've known him for a very, very long time, and I brought him on only a few episodes into Be Cool, just realizing it was going to be, it's a lot for one person to be able to do all of that stuff. Not to mention I had also just been brought onto another show a couple of months before starting Be Cool, so trying to balance all that was a little tricky. And Matt has a lot of experience in that kind of jazz world, and great programmer, great composer in his own right. And so bringing him on and working with him so closely over the course of Be Cool gave us a great shorthand to be able to work with one another. And so when Gourmet Ghost came around, I thought that was a great opportunity for us to kind of join forces a little bit more formally, for the production itself.
And what are the differences in process if you're co-composing versus composing on your own?
Kind of varies. Sometimes we'll just assign each other cues, or I might kind of delineate how I think it should go, and then we have more of a conversation about it. Or I might be like, hey, I'm going to do the Red Ghost theme in this kind of revolutionary way, and then well, Revolutionary War kind of way, not revolutionary way. But kind of then spreading that, okay, I'm going to take all the cues that have to do with that, and you've got this this mystery thing over here. Well, let's find all the places that we get Bobby Flay and and all these things. So you're going to have a specific sound for those scenes, or the cook-off, or when they're having the chase through the hedge maze, things like that. So we can kind of delineate where certain cues are going to go, but we always do it in a way that makes sense. So it's not just okay, I'm going to take this cue that has this theme, but you're going to take that same theme and go into this cue, and do it so it's a smooth process.
Totally. And were there any challenges at all when you were working on the Scooby projects?
I think the challenges for the show, it was just time, and it was always feeling like you're racing the clock. And sometimes there's just things that I want to continue to fix, or I think the programming could be better, or knowing that the showrunner wants to fix a couple more of those within a frame or two kind of hits. And I mean, kind of gotta you're at 96%, and is it worth it to spend all that extra time to get to 98%, or do we need to focus on another episode to get it further along? And so it was always just tough to make those decisions, and always wanted to stay up the extra several hours and make it the absolute best that we could make it.
What is your favorite song that you composed for the Scooby-Doo franchise?
Ooh, song or like theme?
Either or. What's your favorite thing that you composed?
I really like the opening to the Red Ghost film, or the main titles. I think they're like a minute and a half or so, where I got to write a longer form theme because we had more time in a feature to do that, but also seeing how we can develop it in three different ways, going from, like a drum and fife kind of thing from the 1700s, and then, developing it into something else while you get these images of the Industrial Revolution, and then getting a little bit more into present day while then pushing it a little bit more into the jazz feel that the rest of the film is in. So it was a fun challenge to write and make it still feel very cohesive overall.
Just as sort of an aside, in some of the older projects, they did a soundtrack. Was there ever any discussion to do any kind of release of the cues from the show or the movie or anything like that?
We did put, was there one from the movie? I feel like there was. Do feel like we got that out there. The show itself, it's so hard to get a soundtrack for an animated series. It's got to be so specific to what they're going for. But I want to say, excuse me while I'm like googling this here.
Oh yeah, no.
Because I feel like we did get a soundtrack from there, but I also could be completely imagining in this. I'm assuming that you probably would have looked it up. I thought we did. I could be completely lying though. Well, we made a soundtrack, but then maybe we got denied a release.
I know there was one that got released for like one of the one of the WWE movies, but I can't recall. I don't think there was one for Gourmet Ghost.
Yeah, I guess there wasn't. I really thought there was. Obviously, it was a very long time ago. But yeah, if one comes out, I'll definitely let you know, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. We're getting into the wrap up here. So why do you think that a cartoon about a mystery solving dog has lasted this long for over 50 years?
I think that there is a connection just to the fun of it, and each character having their own distinct personality. And I mean, Scooby is such a fun character, and it's not only him, but his relationship with Shaggy. I think, it's that dynamic that's, the real attraction for kids. I think, just the silliness. In every episode you get what we called the haircut scene, where you get Scooby and Shaggy doing their thing when the ghost comes in, and they're just moving so fast. They're not scared of anything anymore, and they're just kind of going through to confuse the ghost, and then they're out of there, and then petrified. But they put it on, and then all of a sudden the ghost is like, oh, what happened? But that type of scene that happens I'm pretty sure in every episode of at least the series that I worked on and the original, it's kind of one of those like key things that they have to keep in there. It's things like that though that are just fun, and I think that's what keeps the kids attention, and adults for that matter.
Totally. Just before we end here, do you have any current projects that you'd like to promote, or social media channels or anything like that?
Social media channel, Instagram at JT Monaco, Monaco. That's the main one that I would typically use. And got a couple things in the works, but can't really divulge quite yet. But stay tuned.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
And that concludes today's episode. Another huge thank you to Jake Monaco for taking the time to chat with me. Stay tuned for further Be Cool Scooby-Doo anniversary celebrations and my interview with Matthew Jansen coming to you later this month. For more Scooby content, be sure to check at Unmasked SD Podcast on Instagram or on TikTok at Unmasked SD. You can also always find the podcast at unmaskedsdpodcast.com. If you like this episode and want to hear more, also make sure to check those social media channels or the website. Or you can listen to older episodes wherever you like to get your podcast fix. Thanks for listening, and keep an ear out for the next episode.
Scooby-Doo!